What you have known for a long time, and the President has known of late, is I never say anything I don't mean, and sometimes I say things I mean I shouldn't say. But folks, I mean what I say, and I'm telling you. Wilmington's coming back. Delaware's coming back. The United States of America is coming back. And in large part it's because of this man I'm about to introduce. The President of the United States of America, my friend, Barack Obama.
Thank you. Thank you, Wilmington. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Everybody, please have a seat. It is good to be back in Wilmington. Last time I was here, it was a day just like today. Spectacular day. We were outside. Some of you were there. And it was just beautiful. It is great to be back here in Delaware. It is an extraordinary honor to be here to campaign for the next great senator from the state of Delaware, Chris Coons. I want to just acknowledge some of the extraordinary public servants who are here. You've already heard from them or about them, but all these folks have been such great friends of mine and such terrific workers on behalf of Delaware. I want to make sure to make mention of them. Governor Jack Markell is here, and he's just doing a great job. Where's Jack? There he is. Lieutenant Governor Mark Dent is here, along with Zachary. Senator Ted Kaufman, done extraordinary work over the last 2 years. Thank you, Ted. And my great friend Tom Carper, senior senator. Delaware. Delaware Attorney General Beau Biden, we are so thrilled with the work that he's done, but also his extraordinary service to our country. We are proud of him and grateful for him. And former Lieutenant Governor and soon-to-be Member of Congress John Carney is in the House. And then there's this guy. I've had to make a lot of decisions over the last 24 months, both before I was president and since. The single best decision that I have made was selecting Joe Biden as my running mate. Single best decision I've made. I mean that. Joe has been an extraordinary vice president, a great friend, a fighter, somebody who knows what our core mission is, which is making sure that we are growing this economy on behalf of a middle class so they can aspire to live out the American dream. Joe has lived out that dream. He hasn't forgotten where he came from. And so I know that me taking him out of Delaware for a while was frustrating, but I assure you it was worth it, at least for me, and I think for you. So I am grateful to all of you. Now, that's why it's so important in filling these enormous shoes of Joe that we get somebody who represents those same Delaware values. And Chris is the kind of leader that you want representing you in the United States Senate. He knows this state. He knows its values. When he talks about cleaning up Washington, it's from the standpoint of somebody who's cleaned house as a county executive. Somebody who's balanced a budget. Somebody who's cracked down on wasteful spending. Somebody who even cut his own pay. Believe me, you won't see too many members of Congress willing to do that. Chris has traveled all across this state, talking to people, finding out what's on their minds, listening to their hopes for the future. He wants Delaware to be a leader on clean energy because he knows it'll lead to new jobs and new industries, and he's got a plan to make it happen. Chris isn't looking to be a voice for special interests. He wants to be a voice for Delaware. This is where he grew up. This is the community he's going to fight for if you send him to Washington. Now, in a little more than 2 weeks, you have the opportunity, right here in Delaware, to set the direction of this state and this country for the next several years. In 2 weeks, you can continue the journey that we started in 2008. And just like you did in that election, you can defy the conventional wisdom that says you can't change Washington, you can't overcome the cynicism of politics, you can't overcome all the special interest money, you can't solve tough problems. That has always been the conventional wisdom. It was the conventional wisdom 2 years ago. You remember that? Everybody said, no, you can't. And 2 years ago, you said, yes, we can. And you can say that same thing 2 weeks from now. I want everybody to be clear. There is no doubt this is a difficult election. It is difficult here, and it is difficult all across the country. And although I think Chris has so far run an extraordinary race, I don't want anybody here taking this for granted. This is a tough political environment. This is a tough political environment right now. This is a difficult election because we've been through an incredibly difficult time as a nation. For most of the last decade, middle-class families saw their costs rise and their incomes fall. They saw too many jobs disappear overseas. There were too many parents who couldn't afford to send their kids to college or see a doctor when they got sick. There were Americans working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, just to make ends meet. And all of these problems were compounded when we had the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, the worst in most of our lifetimes. A recession that cost us more than 4 million jobs in the 6 months before I took office. 750,000 jobs lost the month I was sworn in. 600,000 the month after that, 600,000 the month after that. All told, 8 million jobs lost, most of them lost, before any of our economic plans had an opportunity to take effect. It was a once-in-a-generation challenge. And I'll be honest with you, Joe will recall this. Our hope was that because this was such a unique challenge, that it would cause both parties to put politics aside for the sake of the country. That was our expectation. Our hope was that we could move beyond the division and the bickering and the game playing that had dominated Washington for so long. Because although we are proud to be Democrats, we're prouder to be Americans. But you know what happened. The Republican leaders in Washington made a different decision. And I want to be clear. It was the decision of Republicans in Congress, because I think there were a whole lot of Republicans all across the country who, in fact, wanted the same thing. But that's not what they saw in Washington. Their attitude, it was tactical on their part, was that we were climbing out of such a deep hole They had made such a big mess that they figured it was going to take some time to repair the economy, longer than any of us would like. They knew that people would be frustrated. They knew people would be angry. And they figured if they just sat on the sidelines and opposed us every step of the way, if they said no even to policies that they could agree with, that historically they had supported, then people might forget that they were the ones who had caused the mess, and that people's anger and frustration would lead them to success in the next election. That was their strategy. And you have to give them credit. In terms of short-term tactics, it wasn't a bad strategy. In terms of what was good for the country, it didn't work out so well. So the other side wants you to believe that this election is simply a referendum on the current state of the economy. But make no mistake, this election is a choice. This election is a choice, and the stakes couldn't be higher. If they win this election, the chair of the Republican Campaign Committee has promised to pursue the exact same agenda as they did before I took office. We know what that agenda was. You cut taxes, mostly for millionaires and billionaires. You cut rules for special interests. And then you cut middle-class families loose to fend for themselves. We also know the results of that agenda. It's not as if we didn't try it. This isn't, we don't have to guess in terms of how their theories might work out. From 2001 to 2009, slowest job growth since World War II. 2001 to 2009, incomes for middle-class families went down by 5%. Those aren't my claims. That was trumpeted in the Wall Street Journal. Took a record surplus and turned it to a record deficit. An agenda that let Wall Street run wild at the expense of folks on Main Street. An agenda that nearly destroyed our economy. That's what they say they want to go back to, the exact same agenda. If they take over Congress, the other side has promised to roll back health reform so that insurance companies can go back to denying you coverage when you get sick, or denying your child coverage if they've got a pre-existing condition. They want to roll back Wall Street reform so the taxpayers are on the hook again for Wall Street bailouts. And credit card companies can hit you with hidden fees and penalties, and mortgage brokers can steer you to the most expensive mortgage, or a mortgage you can't afford. They want to cut back on education spending by 20% to help pay for a $700 billion tax break that only the wealthiest 2% of Americans will ever benefit from. My sentiments exactly. This is the same theory they've been peddling for years. This is not as if they went off into the desert after 2008 and they said, boy, we really screwed up. Let's meditate here a little bit and let's try to figure out what we did wrong. And then they came back and they said, we realized the error of our ways and we've got some new ideas. That's not what's happening. They're just pretending as if all that stuff didn't happen. And so it's up to you to remind your friends and your neighbors and your co-workers, we've tried that stuff. It didn't work. We've been there before, and we're not going back. We're moving forward, not backwards. We don't want to keep giving tax breaks to companies that ship jobs overseas. We want to give tax breaks to companies that are investing right here in Wilmington, right here in Delaware. We don't want tax cuts for folks who don't need them by borrowing from the money from China to pay for them and cut education in the process. We want to invest in young people right here in the